Welcome inside the midweek edition of Big Ten Today, sponsored by Old National Bank. Rick Pizzo, thrilled to be joined by Trent Meacham. I'm excited. We're talking some pucks later in the show. We'll also touch on Caitlin Clark. I'm assuming you've seen the highlight multiple times.
Well, I was thinking, I thought the three best men's team played last night, but only to be upstaged by maybe the face of college sports and Caitlin Clark. Unbelievable last night.
I made that statement last night. I believe it's true. I believe she's not just the face of basketball, men's or women's. I think she's the face of college sports right now, and it is something to watch each and every night. We'll dive into that game winner, show you the replay again a little bit later, but we start with today's big story and the big fella, Zach Edey and Purdue, #1 in the country. Now, you remember a year ago, Trent, they went to College Park and got beat by 14. It was one of the worst offensive games of the year. Maryland had a terrific season at home last year. They were, in fact, riding a 19-game home win streak until Tuesday's win by Purdue, 67-53 the final. Zach Edey, 23-12. It wasn't an offensive explosion by any means for the Boilermakers, just 67 points. But I think it shows you that they can win in a lot of different ways, going to a tough place to play and limiting Maryland to 53 points. Julian Reese, scoreless. That is an amazing stat to hear.
Yeah, and you said it. If to be the best, to make a deep run in March, that's Purdue's goal, you got to win in multiple ways. You're on the road, a team that's been playing well, a team that really had your number last year. Even at Mackey, Maryland played them really tough. And it shows the dominance of a guy like Zach Edey, because across the board, I don't think Purdue played great. They weren't bad. They were efficient on offense. Their defense was top-notch.
Phenomenal.
But when you have that big fella, 23-12, so efficient, everything runs through him offensively. It was really just him in the low post, him at the free throw line, and then knocking down shots, 9 for 20 from 3. But, Rick, you said it, on the defensive side of the ball, to hold Julian Reese scoreless, Edey plays 34 minutes. So you think about his conditioning and his awareness, his understanding of the game on the defensive end, a true anchor for that team. He's the difference maker every night out. And on a night where maybe the Boilermakers aren't at the top of their level across the board, you still are up by 20 against a good team on the road.
Kevin Willard said it. He said his team was overwhelmed by Zach Edey. He said it's hard to imagine until you see it in person, until you have to deal with it for 34 minutes, the size and how he changes everything. Willard also went out to point out Edey's conditioning, how he's in much better shape, that he can play 34 minutes and still be effective in the 33rd and 34th minute. But I was really impressed by the game plan, because Jahmir Young goes for 26. And I think Matt Painter and the Purdue staff probably thought Jahmir Young's going to get his. He had 37 against UCLA. He's more athletic than our two guards that are going to be defending him. If he's going to be the guy to get 26 or 30, we can't let Julian Reese or Dante Scott go off. They basically shut the water off for every other offensive option that the Terps had.
And I'd also say Young's, a lot of his points were when that game was out of hand. I thought Lance Jones did a stellar job on him, especially throughout that first half, and did not make things easy. Now, Young's coming off a sickness. I don't know if it took him some time to get some rhythm. But across the board, defensively, this Purdue team is locked in. And even schematically, they start Fletcher Lawyer on Jordan Geronimo. So he doesn't have to – he's guarding a non-threat from the perimeter and allow Lance Jones to play Young. But Edey's job on Reese and Trey Kaufman-Wren, Gillis, their job on Dante Scott. I mean, they totally shut down those guys individually, did not get into rotations. And Maryland – when you struggle to shoot the ball like they do, it can make it really tough. You're playing a game against Purdue. You got to knock down some open shots. They had some opportunities and just really failed to do so.
Terps are an interesting team. They're going to have to make a run here throughout the course of the Big Ten season to be a legitimate tournament team. And if they're going to do that, Julian Reese has to be an every-night guy. It can't just be the Jahmir Young show. I know a lot has been made of Dante Scott's early season struggles and that he played better the last 3 games. But to me, it comes down to those two guys, because Young and Reese have to have big nights. And unfortunately, I think they have to have them every night. I don't really think that Maryland can afford for one of those guys to have an off night and expect to beat one of the better teams in this league.
If it's not those guys, you're looking at maybe freshmen or newcomers on that team. And Harris Smith, you know, he's not the shooter. It is a big ass. So, yeah, no doubt Julian Reese has to come to play every night. And when you go up against a guy like Zach Edey, I think you got to attack him. You got to use what's your advantage? Reese does have the quickness advantage, and I thought he looked hesitant last night. you got to go at the bear, the big guy. And
easier said than done.
Hey, it's pretty easy from the seat, right? But I think you got to find a way to put some pressure on him. But I go back to Zach Edey and his positioning. And when you're 7'4" and 280 pounds or whatever, he's such an anchor for that team defensively, and then he just wears you down because you have to bang against him for 34 minutes on the other end of the floor. It's going to be a tough night out for anyone, especially if you're a center and you need to play 30-plus minutes.
Go at Zach Edey. It's like asking your best friend sitting next to you at the bar to go fight the biggest guy at the counter. Yeah, it's easy to ask.
You can't shy away. You can't shy away.
I understand, but there has not really been a strategy that's worked against Zach Edey. That's why he's on pace to win his second consecutive National Player of the Year award. As impressive as Purdue's road win was at Maryland, I think the most impressive performance from the men's game was what Illinois did to Northwestern on Tuesday night, because this was never a game. No Terrence Shannon Jr., and there were a lot of questions after his suspension heading into the FDU game. Illinois scores 104, and we said, but it's FDU. Now it's a Northwestern team that had beaten Purdue earlier in the year. They scored 96 and took the foot off the gas late in this game. Marcus Damask was phenomenal. Justin Harmon is showing us what he can do. Quincy Guerrier, in Rayfel Davis's mom's own words, is a grown blank man, and I agree with Rayfel's mom. Yes, Shannon Jr. is a huge miss, but Trent, Brad Underwood has so many options that he can rely on.
Well, they have a number of I'd say, grown men, older, experienced guys, and they're playing like it. I think them defensively as well. When I looked at these two teams, look, across the board, all 5 positions, Illinois is bigger and quicker. And that's not a good recipe for success if you're Northwestern last night. Northwestern averages 16, 17 assists a game. They only had 8 last night. And here's the deal, Rick, with Illinois' defense. We'll get to Damask, but defensively, all these guys are, 6'6" and above. They all can move their feet. They're all experienced. They all guard their yard. So they're individually locking down their man, and they're not forced into help situations. They're not into rotations. This team they don't take the ball away much. They had 2 steals last night. They're last in the Big Ten in steals per game, about 4 steals per game. But they just keep you in front. They force you into long, tough twos. They have great length across the board. So defensively, that unit, they are so connected, and individually, there's not a weak link. You can't say that about many teams. And then offensively, I've been really surprised. Now, Terrence Shannon was not a guy, and Robbie Hummel talked about this on the broadcast, that they ran a bunch of plays for it. He got a lot in transition. He got a lot at the free throw line. He got a lot in iso ball. So their offense hasn't changed a whole lot, but they've given the ball to Marcus Damask more. Against FDU, 11 points, 11 assists. And last night, I thought early on, I just thought, man, he looks different. His assertiveness, his confidence. There was a stretch there in the first half. He missed a shot. Then he got an offensive foul. But the very next possession, he went right at it without any passes, got into the paint, pulled up for a shot, knocked it down. He was playing like he was just in complete control. They picked on the mismatches they wanted to. And I don't want to look ahead to Friday already, but I'm just thinking those bigger guards for the Illini, they're going to be looking to do the same things to Purdue's guards.
There's no question. And Friday it is Illinois at Mackey Arena. What a terrific early season Big Ten showdown. He didn't come up by name, but Coleman Hawkins is a guy who can defend so many different positions. I think he's been better. He's been smarter on the offensive end for Illinois. And I found it interesting to hear Brad Underwood say last night that with Terrence Shannon out, the one thing that maybe is a little bit easier is role identification, because it's not other guys just watching what Terrence Shannon Jr. is going to do. They know that with him off the floor, they have to embrace their role, and they have to execute that role to perfection to be as good as they were with Shannon Jr. on the floor. I am in no way now saying that they're a better team without Terrence Shannon Jr. That would be a ridiculous thing to say. But I think it is easier for the other guys to understand exactly what's expected of them.
Yeah, it surprised me. I think that's a great point, the role identification, and that's on both sides of the ball. Coleman Hawkins, defensively, he's been great all season. And last night, he's guarding really a non-threat in Matt Nicholson. And that just allows him at 6'10" and being a great athlete to kind of roam and cause havoc and help, all across the court, which is a recipe for disaster for the opposing team.
He had a couple of nasty rejections coming off his assignment.
But then offensively, he spaces the floor. And so Dane Danger, we thought he might get some more run. Well, with Coleman Hawkins spacing the floor, now those guards can play in the post, can attack the basket. It just really causes just difficult things for the opposing team. I mean, they went to Boo Buie, at Ty Berry, just bigger across the board from those guards. And then you mentioned Quincy Guerrier playing at such a high level, almost 20 points a game over the last 5. Justin Harmon's knocking down shots off the bench. I mean, this team, I've been surprised. I knew they had some depth and experience, but how connected they are and how efficient and fluid that offense has been fantastic in just 2 games without.
You haven't even mentioned Luke Goody, who can shoot the lights out when he gets hot. Justin Harmon's such a good driver of the basketball that you have to respect that. If he shoots like he shot on Tuesday night, 4 of 5 from 3, he becomes a really hard guy to defend. Glad you brought up Dane Danger. Played just 4 minutes in the win over Northwestern. I think they're going to need him a little bit more than that against Zach Edey this coming Friday night inside Mackey. Third and final Big Ten game that was on the Tuesday schedule, Iowa-Wisconsin, was tied at the half, and then Wisconsin scores 51 in the second half. It's amazing to see this offense, Trent, be as efficient and effective as it has been. They're still near the bottom of the country in terms of possessions per game, but they get so much out of every possession, and they just wore down Iowa last night to the point where for the last 8-10 minutes of this game, it was all about the Badgers having the tempo the way that they wanted and playing the style that they wanted on both ends of the floor.
Yeah, this is a different, even though there's a lot of familiar faces, it's a different Badger team than we've seen. I thought they just attacked the basket incredibly well from multiple guys, different ways of doing so. It could be through the post with Crowell and Wall. It could be Wall. I mean, even Max Klesmit, Chucky Hepburn, A.J. Storr slashing to the basket, 42 points in the paint. But that doesn't account for 35 free throws. They got to the line a lot, 25 for 35 from the stripe. So just multiple guys coming at you wore down the Hawkeyes over 40 minutes. A.J. Storr gives them a different element. It's also great to see Tyler Wall, who's battled some injuries. You feel like his confidence is coming back. And now he's not the go-to guy. I think that allows him to find his spots even better. You have your big man, Stephen Krause. When he can step out and knock down a couple shots, it's a similar thing to Coleman Hawkins. That opens the paint. When your big man can step out, it just opens the paint for the rest of the team. I really thought Iowa played very well the first half. Owen Freeman was fantastic. But Wisconsin, their depth, their athleticism, which we wouldn't have said, they're not shooting the ball great. And I think this is a better shooting team than they've shown so far this season. And I think that just bodes that bodes well for Greg Gard and this team moving forward.
Wisconsin turned it over 8 times in the first half. That's basically their game average. They were 4 of 16 from 3. Really shot the ball poorly, but still found a way to score 83 points. You bring up athleticism and a wing player like A.J. Storr, who I think when you look back at the Wisconsin teams that have given the Big Ten fits, they've always had that athletic wing, a guy who can slash, a guy who can do a lot of different things that maybe aren't typical of Wisconsin basketball. And I think that Storr, what I find fascinating is Crowell's a veteran, Tyler Wall's a veteran, Chucky Hepburn is a veteran, and I think it's clear to all those guys that offensively in his first year after transferring from St. John's, right, A.J. Storr is the go-to guy offensively for this basketball team.
Well, his abilities really just, they jump off the page for you. He reminds me a little bit of a guy I played against, Alondo Tucker, in the 2000s, who was a great athlete. And I think A.J. Storr, he's a couple inches taller at 6'7". He gives him a different element. I mean, a couple of his dunks last night, like, are you serious? You know, here in the middle of the game, amidst traffic, or Chucky Hepburn off the glass, that shows a little bit of, I don't know, a little bit of moxie. Yeah, exactly, from the Wisconsin Badgers. I love to see it. That was at a point in the game, though. It was still a 5 or 6 point game, and that kind of opened it up. Couple steals, couple transition baskets in a row. Even though a guy like Chucky Hepburn, who we haven't talked about a lot, doesn't quite have the numbers he's had in recent seasons, he's still running that team. And I think he's learning how to find his spots where he doesn't have to be a go-to guy. But there's going to be nights I think he will have some big moments. And again, this team, their balance and their depth just give them a lot of options. They have a wider margin of error than they've had in the past. And I would say right now, Purdue, Illinois, and Wisconsin, there's probably a couple others that might argue with me. Those are my top 3 right now in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I don't think there's really any argument about
Ohio
that.
State
I'm sure some folks could argue. Buckeyes have had some nice wins, no question. Nebraska's had some nice wins. They have a chance against Indiana Wednesday. We'll preview that one in just a bit. Love the Tucker reference, by the way. That's a nice comparison. Really good player.
Great
that a
athlete,
lot of folks forget
plays above the rim, gives them a different look. Yeah.
Iowa falls to 0-3 in the Big Ten. Wisconsin 2-0 early in league play. More hoops still to come, courtesy of Harbaugh likes to ask Wolverine Nation, who's got it better than us? Right now, the answer is nobody, maybe except for the Washington Huskies, as the Wolverines and their future conference foe get set to face off in Monday night's national championship game in Houston. It is set to be the epicenter of college football. Both these teams in search of their program's first national title in the playoff era. Michigan coming off that Rose Bowl win over Alabama. Good enough to get it done, but there were certainly things to be cleaned up. And Jim Harbaugh says it's a situation he's been in as both a player and a head coach.
I can tell you, having made a bad play in a football game, it's like a train going through your head of, you just almost, you see red. It's like a deafening siren. And, there's a lot of guys that'll hang their head and go in the tank or get that deer in the headlights look. But, every guy that had that happen to him in our game came back and made a phenomenal play.
As promised, Anthony Herron now joining us as you listen in to the sound from Jim Harbaugh. That from Wednesday morning's pre-national championship game teleconference. We'll get to what didn't work for Michigan and how they have to clean that up in just a little bit. But what did work was that defense. And I know as a former defensive lineman, you had to love watching what Michigan did in that first half, especially because they just dominated an Alabama offensive line that had no chance against the defense and ended up racking up 6 sacks.
You can pressure a quarterback either of two ways. You either do it mentally or physically, and Michigan was able to do both to Alabama, especially in the first half of that game. And what Jesse Minter continued to throw at, in certain places where there's inexperience, freshman left tackle up front and Caden Proctor, really talented young football player, but he's on that grand stage for the first time. And Alabama had given up a lot of sacks, especially earlier in the season. They started to shore a few things up, but when Michigan had an opportunity to prepare, my old D-line coach used to tell me, his name was Charles Haley, he said, find the mullet. And they found the inexperience at points, whether it was a running back, whether it was the exterior of Alabama's pass protection, where they would overload some fronts. And in a few different ways, Michigan was just able to have them, when you have a quarterback who holds the football at times, like Jalen Milroe does, and he's looking for an outlet, not getting to it in time, and they were just able to, with defensive linemen and linebackers, at times with DBs, and just continue to find ways to get into the backfield on a consistent basis. And you could tell it disrupted the way that Alabama even wanted to call the offensive game because they didn't have confidence they could protect the quarterback.
Couldn't snap the ball.
Yeah,
the center was clearly, and that had been an issue for Alabama over the course of the year, but I think it was heightened by the fact that he was feeling like Michigan's pressure was coming on almost every play. Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the secondary, because whether it was Mikey Sainristil or the rest of that defensive backfield, their job in run support, they completely shut down Jalen Milroe, throws for 116 yards. But I thought in run support, after that one miss on the Jace McClellan touchdown run, I really felt like that back four did such a phenomenal job helping that Jesse Minter and the rest of that defensive staff could send the big guys up front like wild dogs and say, we're not worried about anything that happens behind you guys.
And when you aren't confident, you can protect the quarterback. And when the quarterback is playing in somewhat of an erratic way, like Jalen Milroe started to in that game, it just enhances the confidence of the secondary, because even at moments where the pass rush doesn't get home, now you have DBs who can kind of bait the quarterback at times, who can have, their eye discipline maybe tested a little bit, know at times where if I'm going to fire on some run support, I'm not as worried about the ball getting thrown over my head. And so it did have sort of this cascading effect of feeling like we can rush the quarterback, we can overwhelm the pass protection, and then the secondary's confidence is enhanced that much. And, Mikey Sainristil, Will Johnson, they don't need a lot of help from a confidence perspective, but when you know your opponent has no answer for what you're throwing at him schematically, and personnel-wise, there's certainly no disadvantage there, then you just saw the way that Michigan was able to get after Alabama's offense. They befuddled the quarterback, the center's nervous. And yes, there was a point in the game where they were able to seize a little bit of momentum, but then like we just heard from Jim Harbaugh, they responded.
Different story in the national title game because Michael Penix is a much better passer than Jalen Milroe. Kalen DeBoer calls a game in which the ball usually comes out of Penix's hand very quickly. That secondary is going to have a very different assignment than it had against Alabama.
This will be the biggest challenge Michigan's defense has faced the entire season.
I agree.
I don't think there's much doubt about that. The personnel, you can compare personnel with Ohio State, but the overall execution of Washington's offense is just on another level. Now, if Dillon Johnson is healthy, and right now reports are Washington's running back Dillon Johnson is expected to play in the game, but he got banged up late. And that's really unfortunate because I think there's a perception for folks who haven't watched Washington's offense very much, that they are just simply this finesse team, and they can hit you in a few different ways.
He ran for over 1,100 yards.
Exactly, and when he's in the lineup, even as he's been banged up this season, they've got an offensive line that can roll off the ball, and he provides that physicality to the offense. And when they want to, a ball control to their offense. We saw them showcase that at times against Texas. Now, they're still going to stay aggressive. Even when they maybe could have or should have been in 4-minute offense mode, they still drop back and threw it because Michael Penix is just that precise. He's that dialed in. Kalen DeBoer has that type of confidence in his quarterback. But, aside from Marvin Harrison Jr., there hasn't been another receiver in the country that's been as special as Rome Odunze this season. And Jalen McClellan is exceptional also. So they've got weaponry everywhere. And the amount of motion that Washington throws at opponents is like nothing that Michigan will have seen this season. And that's difficult to track, especially when you have less than a week, essentially, to prepare. And that pressure package that I was just talking about a moment ago, it can be tough to dial up blitzes and especially to try and pinpoint matchups when the motion will kind of showcase where's the coverage, are you in man, are you in zone, where might the pressure come from? And so Washington's offense, Kalen DeBoer's offense, is able to dictate terms to the opponent schematically in a way that very few teams Michigan has faced this season can.
I think linebackers, maybe safeties, also have to worry about Jake Westover, kind of an unheralded tight end, a guy who they rely on a lot in third and short situations to make critical catches. I think it's going to be a fascinating,
very much so,
cat and mouse kind of chess match between Jesse Minter, Kalen DeBoer, the two play callers, Michigan's DC, and Washington's head coach.
You talked about Penix in the pocket, not only getting it off quickly, but the way he manipulates the pocket is on another level. We saw how special he was at Indiana just with his passing ability, but he's a much more seasoned quarterback now where even when he's under duress, there were times where Texas was able to get home, and he did take off and run a few times. We've known here on the Big Ten Network and Big Ten fans, Hoosiers fans, we saw the injury story of Michael Penix Jr., both with the knees, with the upper body, really never finishing a season in Bloomington. He's gotten to a point, though, in his development, in his career, where, yes, he can take off and run, but even when he doesn't, he's able to make these slight, subtle movements as a quarterback in the pocket that still make it difficult to try and sack him. And then, yes, he's got now a quicker release and is more decisive. His brain is like a microprocessor where he seems to know where everything is coming from. This will be a challenge like Jesse Minter and that Michigan defense have not faced.
Go back to 2020 when he was still playing for Indiana, 342 yards and 3 touchdowns in the Hoosier win over Michigan. Much different Michigan team, much different year overall, the COVID season. Still, there is a little bit of history there. Do want to touch on Michigan's mistakes in the win over Alabama in the Rose Bowl because Jim Harbaugh addressed them. They were mainly on special teams. Special teams are a disaster. They had the muffed snap on the extra point, a missed field goal. Samaj Morgan drops a punt. The Thaw recovery was unbelievable in the end zone because I thought he had just lost Michigan the football game. How much do you address that heading into this game? How much is it simply a teaching moment? We won, and it's a one-game thing. I don't want you guys thinking too hard. I don't want that paralysis by analysis because you made some mistakes in specials.
Because Michigan has been so precise and really from an execution perspective, they've been pristine throughout the season. They don't turn the football over. They don't have ill-timed penalties, even holding calls, things like that. There were games where Michigan was unflagged during the season here, so it's not a part of their DNA. That's where, to me, I think it's safe enough for Jim Harbaugh to actually address that. If it was a team where this was a consistent refrain for them throughout the year, then maybe you're worried about that creeping into their psyche a bit more. We know the competitive DNA of this squad, how experienced and focused they are. And we do know that wasn't their best performance, but to your point, Rick, it was mainly about some of those sort of execution moments. And I think it's safe enough to address that and for players to recognize that, this is where we weren't at our best. And if we do that, if we maybe blow a protection against Braylon Trice, it's going to be a strip sack. Or if we do muff a punt and give them field position, then they're going to have defenders. Because I think Washington's defense is a little bit underappreciated with how timely they've been this season. They've got playmakers on that side of the ball who can make you pay if you are backed up. So field position will end up being a big key. On the whole, though, when you think about what Michigan's offense has faced as of late with Penn State and Ohio State, Iowa, Alabama, the last 4 defenses are stellar. This should be a version of Michigan's offense that I think will be maybe under not necessarily less duress, but it will be a defense that's not on par with the last 4 they faced.
All right, Michigan has to upset history here because in the previous 3, I believe it was, 1 versus 2 matchups in the CFP national title game, The number 2 seed has won all the previous matchups. The number 1 has never won in a 1 versus 2 in the playoff era. Michigan will try to become the first and bring back the school's first national championship since that 1997 season. The good vibes,
lost
of course,
to that squad,
that
man.
ended in the 1998 Rose Bowl. This playoff run begins in the Rose Bowl. All right. So what was under your Christmas tree? What did your favorite gift look like? For Kyle McClellan and the Wisconsin Badgers, it was a holiday face-off trophy. McClellan did not allow a goal in 6 periods, couple of 3-0 wins for Wisconsin in that tournament. It is time now for the big stat presented by Old National Bank and those back-to-back bagels. Shutouts 4 and 5 on the season for McClellan. You look at these numbers. He leads all of Division I college hockey in goals against at 162, save percentage nearly 940. If you're not a big hockey guy, that's a ridiculous number. 14 wins on the season, and of course, those 5 shutouts. As you may have guessed, our guest for today's big interview is Wisconsin goaltender Kyle McClellan, who joins us at this point. All right, Kyle, goaltenders and hockey folks talk about goalies seeing the puck well when they are playing well. What does that actually mean? To you, what does it mean to see the puck?
I think most of it's just kind of having that confidence. Obviously, from the get-go, you got to be ready. Yeah, I think it's just, through all the bodies and right when the puck comes off the stick, I think all aspects of it kind of goes into the goalie seeing the puck.
And a lot of it obviously has to do with what your defensive core is doing as well and knowing their assignments. As a team, you've allowed 31 goals in 20 games. So defensively, what is this team doing so well as a unit right now?
I think what we've been doing all year so far is buying in. Obviously, our forwards are blocking shots, our D are blocking shots. They're making my job pretty easy, giving me shots that I'm able to stop. And as a team, I think so far we've been doing a really good job of playing as a team and coming together, and that's kind of led to some of the wins so far this season.
I mentioned the back-to-back shutouts in the holiday face-off. You stop all 55 shots that you faced. For those who have never got to enjoy that feeling, how do you best describe that moment as you're watching the clock count down, you see the 0 on the opposing scoreboard, and you know you're a couple of seconds away from having the team skate toward your crease and engulf you in celebration?
Yeah, no, it feels really good. I think more so than an individual effort, I think it's a really good team effort. We've had a few of them this year, so like I said, it's a great team effort, and it feels really good when the team paddles on the ice and we all celebrate together.
Started your career at Mercyhurst before transferring after a couple of years. Played a little bit behind Jared last season. How different is the feel for both you individually in your role and as a team with the new coaching staff this year?
Yeah, I think a lot of it personally for me is confidence. I think coach has done a really good job of getting everybody to buy in. Which is, I think, led to a lot of that success. So, yeah, everyone's really confident so far. We're all buying in. I think every day we're trying to get a lot better. So all those combined kind of have led to where we are today.
Now, Hasty joined us shortly after he decided to take the job, and obviously it was a phenomenal start for you guys. You chat with him. He is such an amiable guy to talk with, loves to tell stories. What's he like in the room? What's he like at practice in those moments that kind of only you guys see?
Yeah, I think a big part is obviously when we have work to do. He's that coach, but at the same time, he's a great guy. He's a good mentor, and I think he's been able to relate and connect with a lot of us, which has definitely helped us a ton so far throughout the season.
For you, what was the biggest difference after the transfer from Mercyhurst, which plays in the Atlantic, typically, not always, but typically a one-bid league, into the NCAA tournament? What was the biggest transition and change for you in terms of whether it was style or speed from that league to the Big Ten?
Yeah, I think the style has changed quite a bit. It's a little bit more skill, slower pace, a bunch of breakaways, a few 2-on-0s, 2-on-1s. But yeah, I think all in all, it's just a lot of really skilled players and more chances. So it makes our job a little bit harder, but at the end of the day, it's fun.
All right, let's have some former goaltender to current goaltender chat. You look at the position and the evolution of this position. Way back in the day, it was the brave guys willing to play without a mask. And then the Gretzky years and the bigger, taller goaltenders, the Ron Hextalls of the world, Patrick Waugh. You had the occasional athletic guy like a Grant Fuhr, but then you transitioned to the current goaltender, and I think it really started maybe with Jonathan Quick, the guy who could just get from post to post so fast. As you saw that evolution, I know you're much younger, obviously, than a lot of folks who are watching this. Who are the kind of guys that you maybe modeled your game after growing up?
I didn't watch a ton of hockey when I was growing up, but I always watched the Blues guys. So I think for a while it was Halak, and then Elliott, who played here, kind of a coincidence. So I watched him growing up quite a bit. I think now, I think it's fun to watch like Vasilevsky, Shesterkin, kind of those guys that are really tearing up the NHL so far this year.
How would you describe your own style to someone that's never really watched a play?
I kind of talked to my goalie coach about that. I'm not really sure, but I guess cool, calm, and collected, I think, is kind of what I aim for, and try to slow the game down as much as I can for the team. Just so if it gets a little chaotic, I'm able to kind of slow it down and give our team a break.
Now, calm, cool, and collected, as I know, they're not necessarily adjectives that are traditionally applied to goaltenders, who are considered even by their teammates to be usually one of the weirdest guys on the team, a little bit superstitious, some idiosyncrasies. What about you? Do you have any weird superstitions or things that you kind of have to do to feel like you're in the moment?
I'm not as talkative on game days. I kind of keep to myself, try to dial it in. I kind of warm up by myself for the most part before the team warm up. But besides that, I kind of do the dynamic with the team, and most of the stuff I think is pretty normal.
All right, so you're not a guy who has to put things on the exact same way every game. You're not whacking the crossbar and the pipes before and after each face-off?
No, I throw the ball against the wall, which I think most goalies do, but I kind of put on everything on my left side first and then my right. So my left skate, then my right skate. Most of the stuff is left and then right, but that's probably the only thing as far as getting dressed wise. That's pretty weird.
See, I knew there was going to be some things that once we dug a little bit deeper, there were going to be some in there. Okay, let's end this interview the way that a lot of teams like to end practice, with those shootout drills. And when you answer this question, I want you to remember that your teammates at some point are probably going to see this interview. So I want to know, when you're going through your shootout drills, who are the toughest guys for you to face one-on-one, and who's the one guy that you know you are going to own each and every time he's coming at you?
I think Quinn Finley's pretty good. Shootouts. Dexheimer's usually up there. And then I guess so far the easiest I'll say is Whitelaw. So I'll start a little competition with him as far as that.
Yeah, you know what's coming after you, right? After he sees this. Yeah. You know next time that you go out there for a shootout drill and Whitelaw's coming at you, he's going to want everybody to have the phone out or for somebody to be videoing it. So when he beats you over the glove side, he can send it and make sure that you know that that's happening.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, Kyle McClellan, good stuff. We appreciate you joining us here on Big Ten today. Keep up the phenomenal work. A great first half of the season. Look forward to watching you and the Badgers through the rest of Big Ten play.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Always make Trent Meacham up. He's back to talk Big Ten buckets on Wednesday. We start with the later game. It's Indiana, Nebraska. There are some injury questions and issues that could clearly affect the outcome and kind of the flow of this game. But it's an Indiana team that I think needs a quality road win, and it's a Nebraska team that, in my estimation right now, Trent, is probably the best team that Fred Hoiberg has had on the floor getting into the restart of Big Ten play.
I'll say up front, Rick, I think these two teams could surprise some people. We've been down on Indiana maybe a bit or across the league. They haven't think they're as strong as I believe they could be. They haven't been whole this year. And Xavier Johnson has been out. If he gets back, I wouldn't expect him to be maybe at full strength the first game back. But if he can come into form, this is a different team because they're a young team. They start 2 freshmen and 2 sophomores. You get your 6-year senior back. That would help a lot. You get Ware back after he missed the last game. They have a lot of firepower. So strong inside. Malik Renew, 30 points and 9 rebounds the last 2 games. And Rick, Nebraska, I would agree. I think this is Hoiberg's best team in Lincoln. I love how they play. And they spread the floor. They're a balanced team. question mark with Rink Mast.
They're going to need him tonight if Khalil Ware is healthy for Indiana.
They will, because they're smaller without him. Juwan Gary, he plays above his 6'6" frame, but they're going to need the 6'10" Mast. And when he's on the court, he is the hub for them offensively. They got shooting around him. Indiana struggled to contain the three ball. They gave up 17 threes against Kennesaw State in the last game. Nebraska shoots almost half their shots are threes. So that's going to be critical. Can Indiana defend the three-point line? And then can Nebraska defend the paint against a big Hoosiers front line?
And Nebraska has done what it's done with Keisei Tominaga being okay. Clearly hasn't played as well and has been limited this year by injury as he did a year ago. This is going to be a fascinating game and a really important game, I think, for both teams. Hoosiers have a chance to start 3-0 in the Big Ten. There's been a lot of criticism of this offense. They could be unbeaten through 3 games in the Big Ten. Of course, Nebraska ruining that loss to Minnesota when they got blown out in the second half, but they still have a chance to go 2-1 through their first 3 games. That is the late game tonight on the Big Ten Network. The first game is Rutgers and Ohio State. And I know the Buckeyes are still not inside the top 25. They're 11-2 overall. And I think the maturation and the evolution of Bruce Thornton and Roddy Gale make this maybe the Big Ten's most underrated team as we jump into 2024.
I said Purdue, Illinois, Wisconsin, maybe the top 3, but Ohio State could have some issues with that.
Sure.
Because they are right there. Rick, we've talked about since the beginning of the season, Roddy Gale and Bruce Thornton, possibly the best backcourt in this league. I would say they are. Bruce Thornton, over 4 assists a game, under 1 turnover a game. So I think if Rutgers can have any hope, they got to speed them up, maybe force some turnovers. But Bruce Thornton at the point guard, he's in such control. He's so strong. He doesn't get sped up. That's really difficult to do. And then Roddy Gale coming off a game against West Virginia, 32 points, 7 rebounds, 6 assists. He can score at all 3 levels. He got to the free throw line, went 7 for 10 from the free throw line. His numbers, too, his splits across the board, about 50, 40, 80% field goals, threes, and free throws. That's elite right there. Those 2 guys in the backcourt is tough for any team. Jamison Battle shooting the ball really well, been very consistent at that 3. It feels like he's kind of really found his flow as a third option or so for the Buckeyes. And then their centers, it's very different looks that we've talked about. And Felix Akpara and Zed Key just gives opponents a different look on both defense and offense. So I like this Buckeye team, and they're going to be, look, they could be up in that top 3. That would not surprise me.
I like this team a lot, and I think after the departure of Bryce Sensabaugh, and there were some issues, I think, last year with the chemistry of this basketball team. This year, that's not the case. Chris Holtmann has himself a really good basketball team that I don't think anybody wants to play right now, especially in Columbus. As for Rutgers, it's been a rough go. They survive what would have been a horrific loss to Stonehill over the weekend thanks to a late Derek Simpson 3. It's a team that really misses, I think, the shooting of Spencer, obviously the leadership of Baker and a couple other guys who have gone over the last couple of years. It's a team that's just kind of trying to find its way and figure out who it is, and that's not a good thing when you're now back into the restart of Big Ten play.
There's not much time now, and I think that's the key. They've been playing a ton of guys, different minutes. They're playing some of the freshmen, Gavin Griffiths, Jamichael Davis over 20 minutes a game, Derek Simpson as a sophomore playing 24, 25 minutes a game. So they have some great freshmen coming in next season, but hey, we got a season here. We got a Big Ten season. The thing that I've been disappointed, though, with Rick is their rebounding. The rebounding margin is about -3 a game. This is a team, if they're going to have any success, they got to dominate the boards. And Amoria had 17 points, 17 rebounds last game. The competition is going to be tougher. He's going to need some more help on the glass. That's got to be where they have an impact on the game. They're not a good shooting team. They got to crash the glass offensively, find some ways to get some easy baskets. And defensively, they got to be top elite on that end of the floor just because they're not going to be able to score the ball like some of these other teams.
I mean, you look at the guys that they've lost over the last couple of years. I brought up Gio, Paul Mulcahy, now playing out on the West Coast. Spencer playing at UConn. Ron Harper Jr., a guy who could knock down shots. None of those guys are walking through the doors of Jersey Mike's right now. Still a tough place to play, but they got to figure things out, especially on the road. Rutgers and Ohio State starting our Wednesday night doubleheader right here on the Big Ten Network. Take one to Penn State head coach Carolyn Keeger. Career win number 150 on Tuesday night. Lady Lions just ran Northwestern out of the gym. They won by 40 and forced 30 Northwestern turnovers. Much closer game for Purdue, 77-76 over Rutgers. Remember, the Boilers made the NCAA tournament last year for the first time under Katie Geralds. They were in the play-in game trying to get back there this year, and this is a win against a struggling Rutgers program they absolutely needed to have. And you know what I need? I need one more look at Tuesday's seminal moment from the world of college basketball.
Time winding down. Are they going to get the ball up in time? Clark for the win. Yeah! She does it time and time again, the 40-piece, and walks off with the W.
Was there ever any doubt? Now, Caitlin Clark has joined, 4 billion lists over the last couple of years. Best of. This is a cool one. 40 points, at least 8 threes, and a game-winning buzzer beater in the same game. NBA, WNBA, or Division I, men or women in the last 20 years, only 3 players have done it. Ray Allen back in 2006. Dame Time has done it twice. And Caitlin Clark on Tuesday night. That's some pretty good company.
Were they from the logo, too? The game winner, was it from the logo? Step back, I mean.
Dames may have been from half court.
Dames may have been.
Knowing him, and Ray Allen just obviously knocked down flamethrower shooter, but Caitlin Clark just continues to amaze. That was a difficult assignment for Michigan State defender Moira Joyner, even though everybody in the building, everybody in the state knew that Caitlin Clark was going to take that shot. Rick Pizzo back with Trent Meacham and Anthony Herron for a few more minutes. Let's discuss difficult assignments inside the Big Ten. And one of the most difficult, maybe the most difficult this weekend, the Illini. No Terrence Shannon Jr., no issues so far in 2 games without TSJ, but now they travel to Mackey Friday night.
Going from the top women's player to the top men's, and Zach Edey, 23 and 10 a game, over 60% from the field. The toughest thing, though, Rick, is he played 34 minutes last night. All right, so his conditioning is great. He gets to the free throw line over 10 times a game, so he puts so much pressure on your defenses, just fouls them out. So for the Illini, that's a tall task. Can you slow him down somehow? I think what the Illini have to do, though, they have to bring him to the outside. And they have a guy in Coleman Hawkins that might be able to do that, cause some issues, bring Edey out, now open up that paint for their bigger guards to attack. So much easier said than done from this desk. It's a tough task, but Illinois, I think they might have the tools to cause some issues for Purdue.
As long as when Hawkins brings Edey out, he doesn't shoot bad threes.
Not the Caitlin Clark step backs.
That's right. We do not want you shooting from Caitlin Clark.
If there's step-in shots open, I want him taking that 3.
In rhythm.
Maybe expose some things there.
I love you described it as
you heard him say tall task, right?
And got a good laugh out of that, both literally and figuratively. Another difficult assignment this coming Monday for the Michigan defense. Michael Penix, one of the top finishers in the Heisman race, a guy who can throw the ball all over the yard. If Michigan wants to win the Natty on Monday in Houston, they're not going to stop Penix, but you need to limit those explosives.
Now, and I'll say this, because we talk so much about the assignment for Michigan's defense against Washington's offense. I mean, the flip side is actually a really difficult task also because, like I referenced earlier, Washington's defense, led by William Inge, is kind of underappreciated because they've been timely. But there were a couple of games this season, especially once you got into like late October, early November, where Washington's offense was kind of controlled by some opponents, and that's where their defense really had to step forward. Braylon Trice showed again the other night. He's been the MVP of like their Alamo Bowl, the Pac-12 championship game, and the Sugar Bowl. He's just a crazy good pass rusher. At the second level, they've got a linebacker, Adefuwan Olufosio, who is just remarkable with his ability to blitz. How much did you practice
that before the show?
I haven't had to say it on air very much. So I rolled through it a few times there, and he's a former walk-on. He's kind of the Michael Penix of their defense, really, with what he can do, some of his versatility as a blitzer and a sideline-to-sideline guy. And then Jabbar Muhammad. In man coverage, Washington puts a bunch of DBs into the NFL. He's kind of the latest and greatest in man coverage. So this would be a really difficult task for Michigan's offense against a Washington defense that schematically is different than much they've seen.
You didn't hear Anthony actually ask to buy a vowel, but he did, which is why he was able to pronounce that so well. For Big Ant, Anthony Herron, and Trent Meacham, I'm Rick Pizzo. Always appreciate you hanging out with us here on Big Ten Today.